Welcome to Inkhaven Presents, Readings from the Archive, where I invite internet writers that I read and admire to bring an essay that they hold dear to their hearts or influence them greatly, to read it and then we discuss it. My guest today is Nicholas Decker, author of Homo Economicus, which is a young and very prolific economics blog. I think it's one of the best places on the internet to learn about what's exciting about modern economics. Since starting in 2022, he's written over 300 posts on that blog, last year averaging 3 posts per week, which is perhaps too much, and I heard he maybe wants to cut back slightly on the rate of blogging.
No, I can't help myself.
I think you've studied economics at GMU.
Yeah.
And currently, what's happening with you currently?
I'm currently bumming around Cambridge and showing up to classes at MIT.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That seems like a good way to learn things.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, what have you brought for us to read today, Nicholas?
So I brought Kevin A. Bryan under his pseudonym A Fine Theorem, and his discussion of Michael Kramer's 1993 paper, The O-Ring Model of Economic Development. Kevin A. Bryan is a writer who had like an enormous influence on me. He had a blog mostly active like 2011, 2014. And then after that, it turned into like awards and obituaries, and now it's petered out to nothing at all. He got a job. But I found it extremely influential on me because it was like an opening to like all these different worlds of interesting academic econ papers. And so I've read every word that he has ever written on the blog. So Michael Kramer.
If I can just say one more thing about Bryan, I think he was really great at summarizing and describing cutting research. In his about page, he has a quote from Paul Samuelson, the economist. Mm-hmm. He says, more useful to science than being subjectively original, and more truly fulfilling if you can bring it off, is to try to stay informed on what other scientists have done and to advance the frontier by your own quantum jumps.
Yes.
I don't know if I fully agree with it, but it's certainly a effective niche to have that I think can influence a lot of people.
I mean, at least like within economics, I try to read very broadly, and you'll find in my blog that the remit of my blog is extremely wide, from macroeconomics to industrial organization to just applied empirical microeconomics. But no, the essay that's discussed, the paper, the O-Ring Theory of Economic Development. It was published in 1993 in the Quarterly Journal of Economics, which is, I think, the best econ journal in the world. And it had a profound influence on like how I think about a lot of things, right? So the basic conceit of it is, instead of production being like additively separable, it's instead multiplying each other, right? And so like if one step just like cannot be succeeded, the total product is zero, right? And so if you think about it, this applies to like a lot of different tasks, and it also applies to a lot of countries, right? It suggests that like small frictions and distortions like add up multiplicatively. It might be that, like, say, the size of the bribes, that you're required to pay in a poor and developing country are like not all that large, and yet the steps you have to go through and payoffs and whatnot are sufficient to smother out anything, or like take like land development, in California, right? Each of the individual regulations is not all that big, but the total impact of them is much larger because each and every one of them has to be hurdled, right?
Anyway, I think we'll hear it in just a second, and then we can discuss it further.
Yeah.
I appreciate you originally brought me a blog post on Kevin's blog that was 5,000 words.
Yeah.
I appreciate that this one is instead only 5 paragraphs.
It was substantially a discussion of Michael Kramer's work along with Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee, because they won the Nobel Prize in 2019, mainly for their work on like randomized controlled trials, which I think have been a very important development. If you look at like what GiveWell does, essentially they're kind of following in the footsteps of Kramer Miguel 2004.
The post we're going to read is only 5 paragraphs, even though they're somewhat long, and is a little technical, but it is short, and then I think we'll come back and discuss it further.
Okay.
So thanks very much, and we'll listen to that now.
This is Kevin A. Bryan writing on the O-ring theory of economic development by Michael Kremer from 1993. The O-ring theory is unquestionably one of the most influential papers in applied theory of the past 20 years. The basic idea is simple. Write a Cobb-Douglas utility function where instead of labor entering as a lump of homogeneous efficiency units, there are in units of labor for in tasks which must be supplied by in individuals. This represents situation where quantity cannot be substituted for quality. A football team can only have one quarterback, and a kitchen only one head chef. With probability 1 minus qi, a given agent fails at his task, all tasks are identical, and destroys 1 minus qi of the final production. This is analogous to the space shuttle Challenger, which exploded despite only having one bad part, the infamous O-ring. For now, assume no uncertainty about skill. What happens in equilibrium? As in Becker's marriage model, there is perfect sorting. All workers in a given firm are of the same quality. Each firm makes zero profit by assumption. Since quality enters multiplicatively in the production function, high-quality workers are most valuable to firms already employing other high-quality workers. The distribution of wages is far more extreme than the distribution of quality, since the marginal product of high-quality workers is calculated given their employment at high-quality firms. This fact perhaps explains why janitors and secretaries at high productivity firms are paid more than janitors and secretaries at low productivity firms. Making a mistake is so costly at the high productivity firms that those companies are willing to pay a very high salary to someone who is even slightly better at their secretary job. The story is less plausible when it concerns janitor. Surely interfirm equity issues of some kind provide a better explanation, but the theory is clever nonetheless. Kremer further considers sequential production. He notes that Rembrandt's newest assistants prepared the canvas, his advanced assistants painted most of the work, and Rembrandt came in at the end to paint the face and hands. When making a mistake destroys all of the product, the worker least likely to make a mistake performs her task last. If each stage of the sequential production is thought of as a firm who sells their intermediate product onward, the seventh step of production produces profit for the firm of the price of the object sold up to the A stage, Q, times the probability that the seventh step is done correctly, P, minus the price of the good bought from the sixth intermediate company, P prime, minus the skill-specific wage. By zero profit condition, this means that the skill-specific wage is Q times P minus P prime. Since the value of the good increases in every stage, P being greater than P prime, therefore the wage schedule is steeper in skill at higher stages of production. That is, workers who are slightly better get a much higher wage. This is similar in flavor, if not derivation, to Rosen's tournament model of 1981. The argument here ignores the fact that higher skilled workers generally perform more difficult tests. This point was made to me by a professor here at Northwestern. Skill can also be endogenized. In the first period, workers choose a level of education which stochastically generates skill. Their true skill is only observed imperfectly by test score. The worker payoff is her wage minus the cost of her education. Each worker is paid precisely her expected skill. Note the strategic complementarity here. If other workers have a lot of skill, I will also try to get educated. But if other workers do not get much education, then I will not either. These multiple equilibria exist even when looking only at pure strategy symmetric equilibria. Because actual skill level is only observed imperfectly, in a symmetric equilibria, workers end up pooled at firms with other workers at the same test score. Kremer claims this can be a model of statistical discrimination. With multiple equilibria, if firms expect a certain ethnic group to be of low education, then workers in that group will not get a lot of education, confirming the firm hypothesis. Because of the multiplier on wage discussed earlier, the return to education in the low equilibria group will be lower than in the high equilibria group. The discrimination argument relies heavily on the fact that errors on education and on test score are normally distributed. Hence, no matter what the true quality, test scores have full support. If this weren't the case, a worker in the discriminated group can always get the same amount of education as in the non-discriminated group, obtain a higher posterior on his test score, and end up matched in the good equilibrium. Essentially, the labor market is not separated. There are multiple equilibria, but there is not necessarily a sorting equilibrium. Indeed, generating a sorting equilibrium would seem to require, for instance, different costs of education.
Well, thank you very much for reading that. I enjoyed hearing it out loud. Actually, what did you notice differently on reading it out loud?
I
Perhaps.
noticed that there were a lot of grammatical errors that I forgot about, and like garden path sentences that I was having to correct. That's if you saw any hesitancies or like thinking on my feet, that was because I was trying to rearrange a sentence to make sure I was reading it correctly.
Excellent. But anyway, the essay was number 6 on your list of 11 economics papers that made you excited about economics. Why is it so high?
Because it was chronological.
Oh, nonetheless, I think you said I think about it every single day, and there's probably no paper which has influenced me more.
Yes.
Can you expand on where you noticed it?
I certainly think that was true at the time. I don't think it's true anymore that I thought about it every day, because I'm sure that there are some days in which I have not thought about it. But one of the central mysteries in economics is why some countries are so rich and some countries are so poor, right? In between the United States and Bangladesh, right, there's a difference in income of like 40 or 60 times, right? It's an enormous gap. And yet if you look at say skill per person, right? The gap in skill is not 40 or 60 times, right? So then what Kramer's essay provides for us is a reason to think about oh, why can that change, that smaller change in skill produce a very large change in incomes across countries? And of course, yes, it can. There's a follow-up sort of piece by Chad Jones that got published in 2011, and I think in AER. That's weak links and intermediate goods in the study of growth, and so you can pretty well explain most of the differences in the income distribution across countries just with differences in human capital.
Can you expand on that a little? I understand. So I understand that the model is saying that if everyone working in a company has a 0.99 success rate without errors, then you'll produce quite a lot of the goods. But if everyone has a 0.9, then you'll produce far less. And so
yeah, and there's a much larger change in output as the number of tasks multiply that have to be done
yes.
together.
The
Right?
difference between 5 and 50 is astronomical.
Yes.
So can you expand a bit on what the implications are relatively for within a country's distribution of talent and between countries? I don't quite have a sense of which side is harsher in terms of the effect.
So I mean, what I think you mean by that is actually, what do you mean by that? Sorry.
I have a sense that the paper is saying that both within a country there'll be a lot of inequality in terms of the output of firms and the wages of people.
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
You don't. That's not necessary. It says that the steepness of the the skill wage slope is going to be steeper than the skill slope, right?
I see.
But it doesn't. It doesn't make any claims about how skill is distributed within the country, right? Because you can imagine a case where suppose everyone has a homogeneous low level of skill in another country where there is a distribution of skill, and they sort into different firms, and the wages are going to be higher in the country with higher skill on average, even though there's more dispersion.
I should clarify that you're an economist and I'm a layman, and I will be asking very simple
okay.
questions. But yeah, sorry, what were you going to say about the? You were talking about the effect of the explanation of why different countries manage to sustain at such different levels of income inequality.
Income inequality within a country or between countries?
Between countries.
You have some production function that is multiplicative, and you need every part of the chain of steps to go right, and so as a very small difference in skill leads to a very big difference in income. And he also notes, by the way, that as an implication of this, it's entirely possible for people to have be in persistently low or persistently high equilibrium, right? Where like if your return to education is dependent upon the amount of education that everyone else has sought and attained, like if you are, in a Kalahari Bushman, right? The return to you investing in becoming a skilled programmer in Rust or Ruby on Rails or Python, right, is very low to you because there is not the people around you to work with where those skills are useful. So it might be conceivably possible that if everyone decided all at once we are going to obtain education and do this, you would be able to do it, but no individual person would be incentivized to do so. And he mentions in the last paragraph that like there's also like an implication for maybe like group discrimination even within a country. But he notes like parenthetically that it requires the labor market to be segmented. Otherwise, you can like demonstrate your quality independent of like what people's prior are given their beliefs, right, and be hired anyway. But when the markets are segmented, which they largely are between countries, it's perfectly possible for these equilibrium to be sustained. So yeah, that's like I guess like the level zero is like explaining differences between countries. It also suggests like very promising like research agenda, which I unfortunately I don't think my summarization will do justice to on like firm sorting, right? And like are there like firm worker like complementary skills, right? If you match higher skill workers to higher skill firms, right? Do they have pay greater than can be explained by either of them? And this is actually an area of the literature that I'm not as much of an expert in, but the basically starting framework is about Kramers-Margolis 1999, which is that you use movements from of workers from firm to firm to like separate how much of their pay is due to who they are as a person, how much of it is due to the firm, like the firm fixed effect, and like the initial work like ruled out complementarities, but it's my understanding that like later work mostly involving like Patrick Klein is able to include that, and there is substantial sorting. Like the last I remember reading on the subject is that like if you look at like wage inequality in America, for example, most of it is between firms, not within firms, mm-hmm. right? So the story of the like Walmart executives or whatnot is only a very small part of increasing inequality. The great mass of it is absolutely with software engineers, or whatnot.
You mentioned that different countries segregated markets. Mm-hmm. I think this leads you to be more pro-immigration as a result of that.
Yes. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but fundamentally, we should expect increasing returns from trade. In fact, you need increasing returns for trade to be useful at all, right? And the increasing returns here are coming from specialization, right? So we should expect that allowing people to move across national boundaries, or for the same reason that allowing them to move across labor markets, or allowing them to move across the street, or from one side of the house to another, should increase incomes for everyone.
Where that would be especially high-skilled immigration to firms being like especially lucrative.
Not clear.
Okay.
So like suppose that you think of there being like two types of labor, like high skill and low skill, and they're in some sort of like CES production function where the two of them are like more productive when combined. It's not necessarily clear like which one the marginal returns from immigrating would be higher. I think in practice it is.
You said CES production?
Constant elasticity substitution.
Okay.
Anyway,
I'll Google that later.
Okay. All the different like things you're combining like trade off against each other at the same like elasticity substitution. So it has the same they're basically identical. That's actually a bad explanation, but whatever. We would expect though, if like people are free to move, right, that they will go until the marginal returns to either of them immigrating are equal. Now, in practice, I do think like higher skill immigration is probably more valuable, but that's for like a separate reason. It's because of there are lines of work being more likely to have positive externalities. Externalities, by the way, are like impacts to people outside of a given transaction, right? So if you work as a scientist and you discover an idea, right, that earns you money, that earns profit for some employer, it also causes a great deal of benefit to the rest of the world from finding that idea, right? Um, and there's unextracted consumer surplus, right? That is created as a result of this. So in practice, I would say that high skill immigration is like more important, and that's what we should do. Like if we have to make trade offs.
Um, just returning, you said you think about it every day. Is there much more empirical data that you keep finding that this keeps like reinforcing to you, or that like you keep making sense of through this particular frame?
Uh, I would not say so. It was just like a very fundamental insight into like how the world worked that shook up my view of the world. Something where it is useful for like understanding new things is in thinking about like the effects of AI on economic output, right? So again, we're in the initial setup of the model, right? They're having in workers doing in tasks, to produce in goods, right? So each worker does one task, right? But most people do jobs, not tasks, right? And so now there's like let's say there's a collection of tasks, right? And a lot of jobs are the case where you need to do all of them like together. You can't really separate it, right? And if one part of your job becomes much more productive, that is not going to be like a one-to-one increase in total production. It's going to be dragged down by what the weak links are in that, right? So if you look at like what impact will AI have on wages, right? If it only replaces some of the tasks, right, the benefits are going to be muted compared to like what would be possible if there were no such weak links, and you'll have, you know, like increased wages for the human, and possibly an increase in the labor share, right? Obviously, you would need to like specify like how these tasks relate to each other, but there's no a priori reason for AI to lead to higher or lower unemployment, or to higher or lower wages. Either of those is possible for the labor share, and it all depends. And the more that AI is like partially automating tasks with substantial weak links, you'll have an increase in the labor share of income.
You'll have an increase because the net production will
Them doing the
substantially
tasks
increase.
that are left over that the AI can't do is more valuable.
Right. Right. I don't know exactly what it implies for the number of jobs, but it certainly implies that those jobs become more valuable.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. I think I want to turn, and we can discuss this more, but I think I also want to turn to just ask a little bit about when did you find affine theorem? How old are you?
Spring of 2024, so I was 23 at the time. I believe that the origin of this was looking up Meyerson 1981, who is Roger Meyerson. He's currently at the University of Chicago. He was at Northwestern, won the Nobel Prize in 2008. Very fundamental contributions to auction theory, as well as like just mechanism design in general, right? So
I saw you had a primer on auction theory on your blog.
Yes, that was very early. I'm not sure how much I can trust it, but I was certainly thinking about it at the time. That is something where I go back to like stuff from 2024, and I think it's largely bad. In some cases, it's fallacious, which I've tried to note when I made a substantial error in interpretation. But for the most part, it's just bad, and I don't understand. Well, I don't understand anyone would be impressed by it, and I certainly do understand the slow take up. Like I don't think that I had any like particularly good articles until so. I technically started the blog in 2022, but it was extremely inactive.
Yeah.
Right. And I actually started writing after Manifest in 2024, so in
Oh,
June. Yes. And
I didn't know that.
yeah. Um, yeah.
Manifest, which is here at
It
Lighthaven.
is here at Lighthaven. It's a fun event.
And
You should go to it.
it exists because of Lighthaven. The Manifold team were walking about being like, huh, there's a Lighthaven. What if we ran an event here? What would it be called? And then they came up with Manifest.
So yeah,
But how did that cause you to start writing more?
I wanted to impress somebody.
Did you impress them?
Yes.
Good. Well, blogging works.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, no, I don't think I have any good articles until like the one about the railroads in October, and
yeah,
then
in India.
no, that's
I'm
a
sorry,
that's a different
I missed
one.
them.
This is actually the contribution of the railroad to American economic growth.
I see.
And so it's basically just a story of we added more frictions in, and the cost of the benefits from reducing transportation costs increased. And this will be a pretty general story. Because the initial work is by like Fogel, who like is working out a perfectly competitive framework, so price equals marginal cost, and the hypothetical question is, well, what would have happened if instead of the railroad you had like canals? Like how much could we replace? And so he comes out to like it would getting rid of the railroad would reduce GDP by like 1 to 2%, and that seems too small.
Yeah.
To be honest, and so it is in fact too small. Because the two things you're going to be missing are that there's going to be so much land that is not that is not farmable at any cost, essentially. It's just not practical to transport it. You can't build a canal through most of Kansas, right? So it's never going to get farmed. So you greatly, I think you reduce like the cropland by 40 to 60%. And then later on, there was more, some people like digitized the census of manufacturers, which is a once a decade companion. They sped it up recently, but back then it was a once a decade companion to the census where they went to every business and recorded like how much do you produce, what do you use to produce it, etc. And so there's like, there was massive misallocation, and the railroad, by reducing transport costs, allowed like more successful firms to sell to a bigger market and take the market share of the firms that are relatively less productive. And so Hornbeck and Rotenberg in a recent paper attribute like 25% of American GDP to the railroad.
Sounds more plausible.
Yeah.
So do you say you found a fine theorem after you began blogging?
No, before.
I see.
I started. Sorry, before I started in earnest, right?
I see.
And I started reading through it, and it was in many ways an introduction to a lot of like new worlds. And I frankly I model my writing, after his, because I found it like so. So profoundly influential, right? So I'm very much like aiming for an audience of like advanced undergraduates, graduate students, and economics professors who might be reading outside of their area. Mm-hmm. And so the other stuff, I suppose, is just to get people in. It's not an entirely cynical exercise, right? There's a cynical reading that like I want people who might be on admissions committees for grad student programs in the next couple of years because I'm going to be applying. But so there is some utility in that.
Sure. But yeah, I read it. I like reading your blog.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you found his blog. You read those things. Was that where you initially came across the O-ring theory? I
believe so. Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm not entirely sure of like when I first read that paper now. But I believe it was first.
Was your initial reaction to be as impressed and affected by it as you have gone on to be?
Yes, I would say so. I was extremely impressed by it.
Uh-huh.
Because it like neatly settled some like some mysteries that I had regarding like why are poor countries poor.
Uh-huh. Which part, if any, of the model least do you think matches reality? Or when do you notice it most seeming to diverge from describing the world?
Yeah, I would say it's in the a firm sorting prediction, because in the strongest form, it gives a very strong prediction of like complete sorting by relative ability at all tasks. At all like tasks within the firm, right? So the first percentile lawyers firm has the first percentile janitors, has the first percentile secretaries or whatnot, and we just do not see that level of sorting in the data. So
Yeah, I do think
the,
that, like,
the
my
biggest
guess is
factor.
the first percentile tech firm does have also a first percentile lawyer, but
Yes.
not a first percentile janitor. Although
Yeah, so
maybe
there's clearly
I'm
some
mistaken.
tasks where like the distribution of skill is different, for example, and the error rate is just like non-existent, right? And I would think that janitors are in fact one of those cases, but definitely like you should expect like best legal team at most important tech firm, and then the mediocre legal teams are going to be at the mediocre IT firms or whatnot.
Sure.
Um,
I think there's this story that countries can get locked in a bad equilibrium where there are no particular employees that can do things of high reliability, and then there's less incentive to
yeah,
become more skilled. Is that accurate? And um, does it imply any particular stories about how countries can break out of bad equilibrium?
sure. Um, So it does imply to me that allowing a company to kind of internalize its entire supply chain in a company, and giving them like a lot of authority to like handle arbitration disputes is extremely useful, right? A bad court system, for example, is like one of the frictions that
Ah,
and if you can just outsource this entirely, to McDonald's or whatever, and they happen to own all of the farms from which they source their cattle, and they happen to own all of the shops, and they happen to own uh, all of the equipment providers or whatnot. They can make they can coordinate, right? They can coordinate with themselves, which is just like, we're going to take this big investment all at once and we're going to set up a whole supply chain, right? So I think that is one way out, and I think that is what companies do in practice. It's also, I think, a strong argument like for like why mandatory education might be useful. It doesn't take a position on like how that education is obtained. It's not necessarily an argument for like a government-run school system, but it is an argument for education being underprovided in equilibrium.
yeah, I think we were. I can't remember. We already mentioned that you, as a result, were more sympathetic to education being mandatory in developing countries.
Yes,
As a
well,
result,
and in the world too. But yeah,
is there anything else I should ask you either about a fine theorem or Kramer's work before I turn to a different
I
topic?
mean, I can discuss Michael Kramer's work at considerable length, as I have on the blog. I
Yes.
wrote a my own sort of like comprehensive overview of Duflo, Banerjee, and Kramer.
I attempt to keep these episodes less than an hour total, so
Yes.
we will not do the
Okay,
full
but
count.
I would say like the like he consistently has so many like exciting ideas. So like some of them simple, I suppose, but some of them less obvious. There's like the like advanced market commitments, for example, which we had with the COVID vaccines, right? Of
Yep.
the government agreeing in advance to buy a large proportion, even if there are multiple competitors who arrive at that. That is its intellectual origin is Michael Kramer, right? Yes.
When you say the intellectual origins, Michael Kramer,
Yeah,
what do you mean by that?
like he proposed the thing.
Oh,
Yeah, and
when did he propose it, or where?
but I think at least since the 2000s.
Uh-huh.
It was initially for like more for like a malaria vaccine or whatnot, right? And by the way, another interesting paper is it's like pointing out like drug companies have skewed incentives to develop drugs instead of vaccines for two reasons. The first off is that the vaccine tends to inhibit the spread and thus
Yes.
dampens the demand, right? There are positive externalities. That's like the obvious story. The less obvious one is that suppose there are some people who face high risk and some people who face low risk. That's how the story works, right? You're kind of stuck like charging the price that the low risk people would charge
yeah.
at, because you have to charge the same price to everyone. But if you sell a drug, you can exactly price discriminate against them, right? So it's skewed slightly against vaccines and for pharmaceuticals. Right.
You price discriminate just because you can do the overhead of determining price for different people, or just because you can set it for the higher price?
No, because you know if they have the disease or not,
Oh, I
right?
see. Yeah,
and
yeah,
they're
yeah.
willing to pay a lot of money if they do have the disease.
Yes.
They're willing to only pay like an actuarially identical value, but you're going to be leaving the people who have very high risk but look like low risk people. You're going to have to sell them at the same price, so you get fewer profits from that.
Is it not? I would have naively imagined that the great thing about vaccines is most people are supposed to take them, which implies a larger market share than most drugs.
Sure, but that's substantially because the government mandates, right?
Yes.
So that's like the government stepping in to correct the externalities here. He also proposed patent markets. So it's like the trouble with patents is actually the trouble with innovation in general is that you have to pay a large fixed cost to discover the idea. And then once you discover the idea, you can reproduce the drug at a very low cost, right? Under perfect competition, ideally, we should set price at marginal cost, right? But if we actually did that, nobody would make the investment into finding the fixed cost. So then the ideal world is we know exactly how much it costs to find the drug, and we know exactly what the marginal cost is. So we just pay you a fixed amount and you do it, right? But obviously this is impractical. So like, how do we combine the benefits of patents, right, which incentivize development by giving you a monopoly, but get rid of the distortion from, will they have to set the price too high? And so it's like whenever a drug company develops a patent, or maybe any company, right, they have to put it up for auction, right? And they solicit a number of bids, right?
Huh.
And 90% of the time, 10% of the time, the highest bidder wins. And they pay the price of the second highest bidder.
Standard second price auction.
Yeah, standard second price auction. And they receive the patent, and they can do as they will. 90% of the time, the government says, thank you for giving us these bids. We are going to buy it at the price that would have been paid, and we are going to put it in the public domain, right? And so then the point of
Wow.
and so that 90% of the time that gets us to the optimal outcome, right? And we're eliciting the information. And the reason why it's not like, well, why not say like an infinitesimal chance? Well, we're just going to assume that there's some like fixed cost to like figure out what we're going to bid and market research or whatnot. We want that to be balanced out. But
Yeah, 90%, 10% is already pretty extreme in practical terms. But the it sounded like the government had to spend a lot of money in that world that it didn't have to in the main world.
No, it's going to be spending the money one way or another. The question is whether it's going to be doing it in a way that's efficient or not, right? Because like if zero profit condition holds, right, for each drug, the excess prices on the doses, right, is going to have to equal the amount that was paid in fixed cost. And the government is the main healthcare provider in America, for example, right? So they're going to be paying for it one way or another, except now we're able to provide it to many more people at lower cost.
I see.
He also has a paper with Charles Morcombe called Elephants, where it's like, what do we want to do to save the elephants? What is something that is simple for governments to do that they might not have all this commitment power? And it's actually pretty simple.
Is it open borders for elephants?
No. In fact, that might actually worsen things actually, because now if the herds go across national boundaries, then like the poaching in one country benefits that country and has a loss that is spread out. We have the same thing in overfishing, right? Because no single country is in charge of the fish.
Right.
But you accumulate a lot of ivory. And some countries like just burn it, right? I guess as like a demonstration of resolve. But Kremer's idea is like you keep the ivory, and if the population of elephants ever falls below some level, you release it all, you sell it, and you tank the world price of ivory, and you make
it cheaply,
and you make it unprofitable to go poach elephants, and you're able to say, if it goes below this level, we will do this, which means that nobody ever poaches them at all, because like once it does actually get down below that level, they know it's going to be an unprofitable enterprise and they're not going to be able to sell their ivory at all. And this is completely incentive compatible for a government with very limited commitment power to do. In fact, the real commitment power they need to stick to is not to sell off the ivory too early, for the payday, right? Yeah.
I'm not an expert here, so a lot of these ideas sound like interesting and good advice.
Mm-hmm.
how often are they just proposed in academic papers and kept there versus implemented?
So the advanced market commitments for the COVID-19 vaccine plausibly saved millions of people's lives.
That's
So
true.
I suppose that's a pretty hefty return on investment.
True.
Nobody has done the nobody's done the ivory stockpiling and the patents remains just an idea.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Mhm.
Thank you. I think just to turn towards the end, as mentioned, you've come here to Incaven.
Mhm.
Thanks so much.
Of course.
Curious how that's been. Any surprises? Anything you didn't expect? How's it been chatting with the residents?
It's been pretty good. The weather is extremely pleasant. I've been walking about. Something that did surprise me is that there is no Stanford Berkeley bus. Like I think that an express shuttle, twice a day in either direction, would do. Would have some business, and so there's like very little, so like surprisingly little cross pollination between the Stanford and Berkeley econ departments.
Yeah.
I've discovered. So it's a bit of a shock, compared to living in Cambridge, where you walk 2 miles down the road and there's Harvard.
Yep.
Right. So that would actually was my main surprise.
Gotcha. Well, we'll see if we can work on that for next time, or otherwise bring them up. But yeah, I think you've just been here for the 1 week, and I think maybe you said you'd come back. I don't know if
Maybe I'll consider it.
You'll see whether your schedule allows, but otherwise, another time. Maybe Manifest or Lesson Line as well.
Definitely.
Wonderful. Great. I think there's nothing much to say at the end other than to mention that A Fine Theorem was hosted on WordPress.com for the duration of its life.
And that you can find my blog at nicholasdecker.substack.com.
That's true as well.
My name.substack.com.
That's true. Great. Well, thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you.
All right. Bye for now. Before we wrap up, I'd just like to thank our sponsor for this episode, WordPress.com. As a teenager, many of the blogs I grew up reading were built using WordPress, such as Slaystar Codex, Don't Worry About the Vars, and Steffel Optimized. The co-founder of WordPress, Matt Mullenweg, went on to build WordPress.com, a hosting service that supports bloggers. It provides an interface that allows you to design your website and to use the near infinite family of libraries and plugins that have been built for WordPress. If you're someone who cares to be able to design your own blog, for your ideas, for your writing, and for your own aesthetic, then by far one of the best options on the internet today is WordPress.com.